Good afternoon. Welcome to our second training on the Iowa Core Characteristics of Effective Instruction. If you remember last time we were together, we studied teaching for learner differences. Today we continue our discussion of the characteristics of effective instruction by looking at student-centered classrooms. I think you're going to see a lot of overlap as we go through our trainings on each one of these characteristics. Let's begin today by looking at the definition of and the critical attributes of student-centered classrooms. In student-centered classrooms, students are directly involved and invested in the discovery of their own knowledge. Through collaboration and cooperation with others, students engage in experiential learning that is holistic, authentic, and challenging. Students are empowered to use prior knowledge to construct new learning. Through the development of the metacognitive process, students reflect on their thinking. Curriculum and assessment are centered on meaningful performances in real-world contexts. As a partner in learning, teachers intentionally create organized and cohesive experiences to assist students to make connections to key concepts. Qualities of a student-centered classroom can be traced back to the early 1900s. Constructivism states that students learn more by experiences and active involvement than by observing. Brooks and Brooks describe the value of allowing student responses to steer lessons and create instructional strategies. Asking questions and leading students to solutions nurtures students' natural curiosity and is recommended over simply giving answers. In a review of literature, there are some common attributes linking student-centered classrooms to student engagement and success. In student-centered classrooms, students are very much a part of constructing their own learning in a holistic environment that capitalizes on student interests. The students are encouraged to reflect on their own learning, to share what they've learned with their peers, and to apply new learning to real-life, authentic experiences. When learners are focused, they become fully engaged in the process. Julie Brown describes student-centered classrooms when she writes, "Put simply, student-centered classroom is when the planning, teaching, and assessment revolve around the needs and the abilities of the student." Armed with the knowledge of students' previous understanding of concepts, student-centered teachers create situations that allow students to make connections to new ideas. These connections can then be developed into entirely new concepts that continue to grow throughout a student's experiences. A deep understanding occurs when new information offered through a higher-order thinking activity prompts the learner to rethink and reshape prior ideas. A classroom teacher must be prepared to offer a variety of learning opportunities that meet the needs of all students as each of us constructs our own meaning about issues, problems, and topics.
Metacognition is thinking about your thinking. In order for students to be metacognitive, they must know how and know the need to think about their thinking. In a student-centered classroom, teachers facilitate opportunities for students to be metacognitive. Teachers in learner-centered schools understand learning to be a self-regulated, ongoing process of making sense of the world through concrete experience, collaborative discourse, and reflection. Teachers can assist students to acquire a set of strategies, define goals, and monitor their progress. Providing opportunities for students to reflect on what and how they learn creates an environment where students take responsibility for their learning and become more of a partner with their teacher in engaging in meaningful learning experiences.
The classroom teacher must possess a deep understanding of the developmental characteristics of their students, as well as how students learn to be an effective partner in the learning process. A student-centered teacher will design learning experiences that explicitly link essential concepts and skills to students' current understanding and natural curiosity about the topic in order to scaffold additional or deeper understandings. Students are engaged in decision-making in the classroom and have the opportunity to more fully explore topics. We are most effective as teachers when we help our students discover the power of their own minds to work in their own ways to achieve success. Teachers who rely exclusively on lecture are missing an important brain-based principle. People are social, and the brain grows in a social environment. New meaning comes through social interaction, so the connection between students is important. Cooperative learning and collaboration should be encouraged. The student-centered teacher recognizes this principle of learning and actively infuses collaborative opportunities into each lesson.
When students are engaged in activities that result in authentic and challenging applications, they are more highly motivated to learn. A combination of real-world assessment and the attributes of assessment for learning provides student-centered classroom teachers with the challenge of moving away from paper and pencil exams. As teachers begin and continue to search for ways to provide meaningful assessment for their students, their instructional activities will begin to fold into and overlap with intended assessment. Students and teachers alike will begin to monitor their teaching and learning and to make necessary adjustments to their actions. A true learning culture will result. Creating a student-centered classroom is not considered an easy task. One of the most complex factors in a student-centered classroom is that of maintaining balance. Each of the 5 above-mentioned attributes is quite an involved concept and may call for extensive learning and practice on the part of the teacher. A true student-centered classroom offers a balance of each of these attributes. A balance of these attributes will empower students to take control of their learning and create classroom teachers who are true facilitators of learning.
There are myths about the concept of student-centered classrooms too. It's important to develop an understanding of what a student-centered classroom is, but also of what a student-centered classroom is not. A student-centered classroom is not a student-controlled classroom. Student-centered teachers can expect the same, if not better, classroom behavior from students who are actively engaged in their learning. The partnership between teacher and student contributes to the collaborative learning culture. A student-centered classroom does not ignore guiding standards of content or cognition. Aligning learning activities to essential concepts and skills is a key attribute of student-centered classrooms.
Using students' prior knowledge in combination with essential concepts and skills provides for instruction that is both more motivating and engaging. Student-centered classrooms are not factory model education with one-size-fits-all instructional approaches or passive sitting, listening, and note-taking without recursive discourse. Educators who believe in identifying what works for different students under different conditions and delivering it to them may find student-centered learning appealing. Student-centered learning is not minimally guided and does not exclude direct instruction techniques. In fact, student-centered learning actively utilizes direct instruction on a just-in-time basis. Direct instruction and other learning techniques are utilized at the times that they work best within a student-centered learning experience. Each student has their own wealth of background knowledge and experiences, and each student has their own preferred learning style. Teachers in a student-centered classroom will create opportunities for learning that take each of those student traits into consideration. Students will be expected to learn and grow in their understandings enough to develop new understandings.